What steps can a couple take to better communication if most of their interactions result in fighting?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does make a lot of sense. So
like
constantly, I get it. Constantly people keep getting to fight.
Yes.
Immediately, where it
Yes.
just doesn't seem like there's any lead up. It's just, we're talking, now we're fighting.
This thing came up and now we're fighting again.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. What you need to do is investigate again. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you think you result to fighting immediately?
Yes.
And you could blame your spouse, and that's the easy way out of doing that investigation with yourself, but you're a part of the fight.
Yes.
The fight doesn't exist. I say this with conflict. Conflict doesn't exist if you're out of it. Like if you're like, oh, my spouse, that means you're just, you're just watching them have issues. You're not in a conflict. A conflict is two parties. Same thing with a fight in a marriage. It takes two to tangle.
Right.
Tango. They both work.
Both, yeah.
But you're involved in it. So what you need to do is to step back from those situations, preferably in between one of your fights with your spouse, and investigate why it seems to always lead to that from you. Because if it escalates to there,
you helped it escalate.
Right. Maybe your spouse does escalate it quickly because that's a default setting from their family. Maybe they grew up and everything was a fight. So they just escalate everything to that degree. That could be the reason, but you're never going to know how you play a part in that positively or negatively if you don't investigate. And maybe you can come out of that investigation and be like, man, I really don't do much to attribute to that conversation rising to the level of a fight.
So what questions is somebody going to ask themselves to investigate how they're a part of the conflict?
I think there's a couple of questions that you can ask, especially if you're trying to discover your part in the fighting. And that should be your main investigation. One thing that you can do is say, what is my part in this? And actually dwell on that. I know we're saying that's what you're trying to get to. Actually ask the question. A lot of times we will say, I'm going to go investigate how I'm involved in this. And then we'll ask all of these roundabout questions that don't actually address the main one, which is, how are you a part of this?
Right.
And that's the most important one to figure out. What is my part in this? From that, you can go to a litany of questions and be like, how has my family, my upbringing played a part in why I communicate with my spouse in this way? I think that's really important because a lot of times we'll discover ways in which our family spoke to each other play right into our marriage relationships.
That's good. That's so true.
So investigate your family of origin and figure out, did they yell? Did they...
What was their go-to response?
Yeah.
I think another good question to ask is, why am I defensive right now? And do I have to be? Because I think a lot of times that adds to the fight because all of a sudden you're like putting up your defenses. So now you're not trying to investigate. You're just like defense and shoot back.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, I don't need to be defensive right now. Let's figure this out. Being filled with curiosity instead of bearing down for a fight, I think would be helpful. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think if you're getting to a fight, most likely there are things in you that won't allow for, it's such a hard topic. Because I want to say that there are maybe some ways in which pride can definitely play a part in keeping you from de-escalating or from allowing your spouse to gain any ground in the conversation, in the communication. So that can definitely play a huge part in not allowing for a more civil or whatever you want to call it conversation.
Right.
So I totally agree with you that that's a great question to ask.
Yeah. Why am I defensive?
Yeah.
I find that for me, as soon as I realize if I'm like aware enough to realize that I'm being defensive, I can see how that will escalate the situation. And I won't be clear on what the other person is saying. Like I won't be fully hearing them because I'm already ready to like defend myself and give a rebuttal. Yeah. And so I'm not able to actually figure out how to better the situation.